Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update, first part thereof for the 26th of June 2025. It's a little bit late today because I keep finding stuff to talk about, and as you can see from my first tab group, my goodness, it might be a little bit of a longer video than sometimes. I have actually cut out a bunch of stuff to put into the geopolitics video because there was just too much to discuss. Okay, Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. Let's whip through these. Remember that we are referring to real human lives, of course. 1,100 personnel lost in the last 24 hours, so that's considerably above 1,000 again. The tanks and AFV categories are typically low, 1 tank and 7 AFVs, 48 artillery systems, that is 4 times the, no it's not, do your maths mate, that is a good double the daily average, just over double the daily average, so pretty useful stats there. And personnel, again, we are seeing artillery systems being focused upon, I think, and I do wonder whether they are at the top of the points list for the Brave One type setup they've got, where Robert Brovdy has brought in the points scoring system for drone pilots so that he can strategically focus on particular targets. We know that drone operators are really high value and there are high points for them, and I'm pretty sure artillery systems are going to be on there up the top of the list. Right, vehicles and fuel tanks 111, 1 piece of special equipment, so some fairly decent numbers there for the Ukrainians, though fairly low on the traditional combat assets. We hear that Russia convicts, a Russian court convicts 184 Ukrainian POWs captured in Kursk Oblast of terrorism, according to Mediat. That also indicates that the Russians did capture quite a lot of Ukrainians, as they, I presume, retook that territory. You usually take prisoners when you're attacking, so as the Ukrainians were withdrawing from Kursk and it was a bit chaotic, sort of something approaching a collapse. It wasn't. They did do sort of operational withdrawal there, but it was fairly quick. And it looks like they lost quite a few, and now they are being accused of terrorism. Russian military courts convicted 184 of these prisoners captured in Kursk for acts of terrorism. But on the other hand, Ukrainian air assault forces have captured 15 soldiers in the Sumy region. So as the Russians attacked into Sumy after taking Kursk back, the Ukrainians have been countering there, and they've taken here 15 soldiers. So it shows that the Ukrainians are indeed having some success there. Actually, on top of that, we're hearing from Sursky, I don't know if it's worth bringing that in now, we're hearing that the AFU have completely stopped the Russian offensive in Sumy region. The line of combat contact has been stabilized. 50,000 Russian personnel have been reshackled, including elite brigades of the airborne forces and Marine Corps, said Sursky. So it's looking, if that's to be believed, much more positive for the Ukrainians in Sumy. But I don't know if it has anything to do with the 15 captured here. We see a variety of Russian soldiers here, but maybe a lack of variety, as they all seem to have some kind of branding. This is the brand of the Russian army personnel that our soldiers found. So you can see these tattoos that have been tattooed onto their chest there, indicating, I don't know, just what is going on there. That's really really fascinating, disturbing maybe. It's almost like being in the army is being like in prison, like being in prison. The analyst also adds that Russia lost a major battle in an attack on Costantia. The Russians tried to launch a 25-vehicle armoured attack from the southwest of the city and failed miserably in their attack. Ukraine held them off, destroying 18 of the vehicles as the others fled. Some 200 Russians were killed. The Ukrainians have a layered defence that involves minefields, traps, dragon's teeth, and hidden fortified positions. The 3-hour battle, it was a near massacre, but the Russians will inevitably try the same thing again because that's what they do. So some signs that the Russians really are taking heavy casualties in the ground that they are taking. They are taking ground, of course, but it's the same story that we've seen for years now, that the Russians are prepared to take those losses in exchange for square kilometers. Now, Russian commanders have falsely declared potentially thousands of missing and dead soldiers to be deserters. So we've heard previously that they like to do this to declare soldiers missing in action rather than dead, because they don't have to then sort out the paperwork and pay the families compensation for being killed in action. And as they are missing, I guess they don't have to pay them their monthly wages, I presume. And in fact, pay them anything. They're just missing. We don't know where they are. Now, if you put them down as deserters, then you get an added level of treating these people with disrespect and giving them and their families even less in terms of compensation and whatnot. Relatives say they are being deprived of compensation payments and accuse commanders of concealing their losses because they have declared potentially thousands of missing and dead soldiers as deserters, as well as using such declarations for extortion. Huge numbers of Russians have gone missing during the war in Ukraine, according to the Russian journalist Anastasia Kashevarova, she's not like, this isn't a journalist who is anti-war, as far as I remember. She's often posting stuff, very, very nationalistic stuff. So just also recognizing some of the issues on the front line. He's campaigned for more to be done to find the missing. 99% of them will have died on the front line but not been recovered. There's been a huge increase in the number of lawsuits filed by Russian district and garrison military courts to declare a person missing or dead. Mediazona reports that between January and June 2025, there were more than 26,000 lawsuits. In other words, you can probably say that between January and June, there were 26,000 casualties of war. Because these numbers, like, at least, so that's not including all the dead. So the Russians will have admitted so many people are dead, and there will be obituaries and funerals and bodies returned to their families and whatnot. So you've got all of that. Then you've got your POWs that they know about. And then you've got your wounded who are in hospitals. But between January and June of this year, 26,000 people have been registered as deserters or missing in action. That's an absolutely incredible number there. So the numbers for the first 6 months of this year have already well exceeded those of the whole of 2024, where there were 22,600 lawsuits. Families and the military authorities bring lawsuits to enable the formal declaration of death and the release of compensation. However, so family, there's no sign of their son, for example, husband. They don't hear anything for a couple of months. Then they're like, right, they contact the unit, no news, don't know where they are, blah, blah, blah. So they then say, right, we want them declared dead as a family so that we can get the compensation. And so that's why they file these at courts, these lawsuits at courts, in order to be able to access that compensation. However, a significant number of Russian soldiers are likely to have been killed by their own side, executed by their commanders, or shot after being wounded, as in the example recounted by the author of the Telegram channel, Soldatskaya Pravda. I'm not even talking about those cases where their death was not so much in vain and in principle unnecessary, like, for example, the fighter from Storm Z who was wounded and with his screams and movements revealed his position and was shot by his own people. Votak reports that commanders have turned on to declaring soldiers to be deserters as a way to hide the number of men that they have lost, as well as a means of punishment and extortion of the living. 25-year-old Dmitry was recruited from a prison in September 24 and was sent on his first mission near Turets in the Donetsk region along with 8 other people. None of them returned. The entire group was declared to be deserters 3 weeks later. Despite this, another soldier told Dmitry's wife that her husband had died and the coordinates of his body were known. It's not possible to recover it because of the constant shelling, but the military authorities refused to rescind his status as a deserter. This has had serious financial consequences for his family. Missing soldiers are paid 30,000 rubles a month, so they are paid something, but those declared to have deserted get nothing. So missing soldiers do get something, but deserters get nothing. So obviously there's a financial incentive. Their relatives lose the 13.5 million rubles, the $172,250 compensation they are owed for a death. So it's a massive amount of money to pay for a death. So there is a huge incentive to declare these people deserted. Commanders have the right to declare a soldier to be AWOL after he's absent for more than 2 days, and can either involve the military police in searching for him or do it independently, even without declaring him wanted. Deserters are often hunted unofficially through messages from the unit to relatives and friends. In one recently reported case, a deserter's lawyer was apparently bribed to turn him in. Leaks from the Russian army suggest that at least 48,000 people deserted between September 2022 and November 2024. 36,000 of them were subjected to criminal cases for desertion. However, commanders have abused their powers to declare soldiers to be deserters, even when they're still alive and serving with the unit. One soldier who was wounded and undergoing treatment in Russia was declared a deserter while still in hospital. Similarly, another soldier lost his kidney and half of the other. He was being treated in the hospital after being declared unfit for service when he too was declared a deserter, despite providing regular updates to his commander. Sergei Konovalov, a soldier from the 247th Airborne Assault Regiment, recorded a video complaining that he had been declared a deserter as a means of extortion. His unit had lost the DJI Mavic drone, for which his commander demanded financial compensation from his men. False accusations of desertion are also used as a means of punishment. A soldier from Tyumen who complained about the non-payment of compensation for an injury was told that he was being declared a deserter for writing complaints. Others have experienced the same punishment. Commanders have also been known to declare people missing to hide the fact that they have carried out illegal tortures or executions. Men who have died under torture have posthumously been declared to be missing or deserted, according to relatives. So this has the advantage for the commander of relieving the army of the obligation to look for or recover the supposed deserter's body. Because remember, if you know where they are and it's known that you know where they are, then you have to go and recover the body. But if the body's in a war zone, like we heard earlier, like right in the middle of somewhere that's getting the crap shelled out of it, then you will lose people in getting them. So it's much easier to just say, right, I know he's dead, even if it's not for like financial reasons or extortion or whatever, that actually we're going to declare him a deserter so that I don't have to send my other troops out there. I'm not obliged to go and look for him. Because it's just too dangerous. So you can sort of understand that. This has the advantage for the commander of relieving the army of any obligation to look for or recover the supposed deserter's body. According to Russian soldiers, executions take place on the front line, presumably so that the body can more easily be concealed. Desertion declarations are also used to prevent men from running away if they go on leave or for medical treatment. Such declarations only give men no choice but to return, as they will be hunted down if they do not do so. So in other words, to stop them becoming deserters, they upfront declare them as deserters so that those guys are like, know that the authorities are after them. I guess they can't have access to wages and whatnot, so they get their asses back to the front line after, whatever break they have had. Men who refuse to fight but have not left their units are also declared to be deserters. Independent Russian media outlets have reported the existence of a chain of detention centres for refuseniks where they are held prisoner and tortured until they agree to go back. Soldiers have also found themselves declared to be deserters because of bureaucratic foul-ups. Men who have been transferred from one unit to another have found themselves being given deserter status because their papers have been lost by the army bureaucracy. For families, apart from the loss of salary payments and compensation, a relative being given deserter status is often a source of shame. Quote, deserter status is like declaring girl as sluts or to the entire country, a woman called Nina complains in a chat forum. Quote, we have to explain to everyone that deserter status means nothing, that everyone is given it. Why is that? He's a hero. He's fought for his country and now he has to prove that he's not a goat. And yeah, interesting thread there from Chris Oweki. Thank you. Okay, Russia is churning out hundreds of new T-90M tanks, but why aren't they all in Ukraine? Now, although this Euromaidan Press article does refer to the CIT piece that I read to you the other day, and I think that's probably somewhat charitable to the number of tanks that Russia is producing. I know Jason in the threads, JMT Politico, was saying that he is on the understanding, talking to people in Ukraine, that they are actually building new tanks and not sending them to the front line. So this article is talking to that. Russia is churning out hundreds of these new tanks, but they seem to be, or their claims are that they are stockpiling them somewhere in Russia and maybe for use later. Although this whole article is about, about that very phenomenon, it doesn't really talk much about but why aren't they all in Ukraine? So it talks about the CIT production numbers here for a long time, talks about how tanks are used, and then there's a very short bit at the end of the article saying, With infantry taking the lead in more assaults, often riding on motorcycles or other civilian-style vehicles, Russia can preserve its slowly growing fleet of T-90Ms and save them for a major future offensive in Ukraine or for some other conflict. The Danish Defence Intelligence Service warned that Russia could launch a war in a country bordering Russia 6 months after the war in Ukraine ends. Ukraine's allies could constrain Russia's T-90Ms by tightening sanctions on Uralvagonzavod. The firm once imported certain crucial tank parts, including optics and circuit boards. These imports are now sanctioned, so they increasingly use Russian-made versions of the same part. It's clear that while Russia continues to grapple with production delays, quality control issues and the challenges of sourcing components under sanctions, it's also making tangible progress in both manufacturing and the deployment of new technologies, Front Intelligence Insight warned. That's Tatarigami as part of that. So it talks about the importance of sanctions, but doesn't really discuss, what these tanks are being saved up for, if indeed they really are being saved up. And I'm not 100% sure, but there are certainly rumours that they are making tanks. And these rumours have been going on for some time, by the way, as well. That they have been, because I reported them to you like maybe a year ago, certainly a long time back, that there were claims that they are stockpiling these in warehouses in Russia. I just don't know why they would be doing that. I would have thought, sending a whole host of T-90M tanks into Ukrainian forces would be better than having them in warehouses. But I don't know. They are, if it's true, they obviously have intentions after the war, or could it be for another Ukrainian a counterattack on Ukrainian forces? But then you want to be training all your forces on T-90Ms, and I'm not sure. I don't know. Anyway, Defence News reports, or Euromaidan Press reports, that Ukraine used a Pringles can to blow up a Russian tank. When shells ran out, a Pringles can did the job. Ukraine is proving cheap, beats heavy. From junk food packaging to deep strike drone raids, Ukraine is turning everyday materials into weapons and using them to fight one of the largest militaries in the world, Defence News reports. In early 2024, near the front lines of Avdiivka in Donetsk Oblast, Ukrainian drone operator Vadim Adamov reached for the empty Pringles can out of standard metal casings for explosives. He packed the can with sulfate and plastic explosive, hooked it to a DJI Mavic drone and sent it flying. Quote, "I don't need your effing American shells," Adamov said, launching the makeshift bomb at a Russian armoured vehicle. It worked. The can cost $1.50, the drone a few thousand, the destroyed target likely worth hundreds of thousands. My mouth is watering now because I want my normal, I go through salt and vinegar Pringles and hummus. I find it very difficult to eat hummus. Eat Pringles without hummus. So I eat a lot of hummus. That can be said. Top tip, hummus and pizza. Okay, right. Random. So, yet again, we're going to be talking about guided glide bombs. I did a kind of special extra video yesterday talking about how the Ukrainians have been developing their own guided glide bombs based on the Russian CARB UPMK kitted bombs that are cheap and cheerful and are causing so much destruction along the front lines. Now, the Ukrainians have been using the American version of these, the GBU 68, 38, 39, lots of different variants of these depending on what size it is and what it does. And also the French AASM hammer bombs. So here we have imagery of people using a building to accumulate in. MiG-29 then destroyed a Russian battalion command post in the south. Reconnaissance spotted Russian forces gathering equipment and personnel in an abandoned building. The coordinates were passed to our pilots and the strike landed perfectly. So this sort of thing is happening all the time at the moment, just huge explosions. Now here's another one, because I don't know if this is the use of what I was talking about yesterday already, and that was talking about Defence Express. We're talking about this prototype and that they just need the money to make scale production of it. And they're talking about testing it. But the claim here is reportedly one of the first documented Ukrainian strikes on Russian positions using FAB bombs equipped with UMPK, Universal Gliding and Correction Modules. Which would assume, that's a language of the Russian bombs, right? But the only way to make sense of that is, unless they've captured an area that has a load of these Russian bombs, is to use, the only explanation is they're talking about the Ukrainian version, which I was discussing yesterday. So Zaporizhia direction also declared as a strike by Ukrainian FABs with UMPK. So it could be that they're already using their own $25,000 guided glide bombs, which would be really good news. It means that they'd have a much greater supply of this. And I was wondering yesterday in the video whether they would have an issue with not having enough planes. They might have enough munitions in terms of what the Americans are given and the French, but there was the idea that actually no, they need more munitions. They might well have enough planes to do this delivery. And talking about the delivery of these bombs, here's a Ukrainian Air Force MiG-29. So the good thing is they can use some of these much older airframes to do the business of dropping these guided glide bombs. Here are 3 GBU-39 bombs being dropped out of the off of the MiG-29 there. Right, what else do we have? 40 Russian Mavics destroyed, 3 enemy FPV drones eliminated, Ukrainian quadcopters with net launchers were operating. So we know the Russians, I think the Russians came up with this first, which is using drones to drop nets on other drones. This looks to be a Ukrainian drone firing nets at almost a horizontal on a horizontal plane, as well as dropping them on these Russian drones. So we've got 40 Russian drones, some of them big ones. There are a couple of big, like really big quadcopters or hexacopters, I can't remember, that we just saw. Real vampire drones being taken out by these nets. These are cheap, I assume pretty cheap to create these. There's no expensive explosives. It's just as long as you've got a firing mechanism for a net's not going to be that expensive. And this drone, I assume, can be reused. Go back, get another net, just have a bunch of these operating just 24/7, trying to take out enemy drones. And here we have an awful lot of these Russian drones being taken out time after time by these net carrying drones. Now, of course, with something as simple as this, and we already know that the Russians operate these, the question is, who operates more of these? Who has more success? Okay, we've got a video of huge amount of success here for the Ukrainians on Russian drones. Are the Russians doing the same to the Ukrainians? I haven't seen net dropping drones for some time now. We've been talking more about, drones firing shotguns and just flying into interceptor drones flying into other drones. But it's good to see a low-cost, reusable solution to the problem of Russian drones there. Now, Rob Lee here reports from the Financial Times. At this point, you're a lucky man if you drive 5 kilometers from the front line and your car is still operational. A Ukrainian drone unit commander deployed in eastern Ukraine, Donetsk region, told the Financial Times. He said that his men now sometimes had to walk up to 15 kilometers at night to reach their positions. This is a problem that the Russians have had previously, as the Ukrainians have had drone control over the Russian areas, the other side of the contact line. But it looks like the Russians equally have this effect on the Ukrainians. In the past weeks, the article says Ukrainian supply trucks have reportedly been hit by Russian drones on the road linking Kramatorsk and Dnipropetrovsk, some 30 kilometers from the fighting. On both sides of the front line, roads are being covered with anti-drone nets in an attempt to stop fiber optic drones. Real issue for both sides there. And logistics routes are being hard hit, and particularly in that area, actually, the sort of Toretsk and upwards, the Russians do seem to be having a bit of they're certainly having success with their drones in hammering Ukrainian logistics. So in Toretsk, the Ukrainians are struggling to supply their own troops there because the Russians have such strong presence in the skies. Now, Visioner here says the armed forces of Ukraine continue striking Russian army logistics deep behind the southern front. So we're going to move away from the sort of contact line and into the deep rear now. And we're going to talk about railway logistics. And this is something that's been discussed a number of times by myself and others, with many saying, why the hell have we not seen as much destruction of Russian railways as we should have done? And we are now starting to see it happen quite a bit. According to reports, Ukrainian Special Operations Forces recently conducted a sabotage operation near the city of Tokmak on the Zaporizhia front, successfully severing a Russian military train in half. As a result, around 40 rail cars, including fuel, vehicles and various equipment, are now scattered across the field. Now, I don't think this is the one that happened the other day, which you'll see footage of in a second. This one that we saw the explosions taking place on the train, I think at 3 different places on the train. And firms data then showing quite widespread fires there. That happened some days back. And then Intel Schizo said, thank God Ukraine is finally attacking Russian rail in occupied Ukraine. Image being Ukraine. I don't know. I think that might be a weird translation. Ukraine every few days. Trains like this pass all across the Russian rear between 15 and 45 miles from the line of contact. So I think what he's saying, thank God they're finally attacking these. And he's intimated it's just happened again after this, because there's a conversation that goes down here. He's saying, no, that was illustrative from what happened a couple of days ago. But actually it's happened again, and we're just waiting for more information. He said 2 days ago, the red train icon, today the grey train icon. So he said 2 days ago, that was the one that you see exploding above. And this is the one that's just happened now. And in fact, he then comes out with this, which is Tokmak is turning into a graveyard of trains. This is amazing news if it's true. So potentially we've got 8 incidents of trains being struck on these railway lines around, well, sort of going from Polohy sort of area through Tokmak, and then even down through Melitopol to Chonhar and the north of Crimea there. Really significant. So that is a very good piece of news. This came from the 25th yesterday. Ukrainian forces have cut in half a massive Russian military train in occupied Tokmak. That was what was just mentioned. They're now attempting to destroy the rest of the 40 carts with pinpoint strikes. That was the Visioner claim that we just gone through. 65th Mechanized Infantry and attached Ronin drone unit, says Intel Schizo, are turning into pros with attacking trains with FPVs, practically the only unit in the entire Ukraine armed forces that appears to be doing so. And then we see this footage coming out. So Tim White says, a reliable Russian channel spy dossier brings more detail and video of the Russians trying to stop an attack on a fuel train hit by Ukraine near Tokmak 5 days ago. So I don't know if this is the one from the original footage, not the one that's been split in half and blah, 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 but this one that we saw some time back. Let's just remind you, you had a drone hitting this drones hitting this train, certainly in 2 places. You can see one in the middle there, then another one happening there, and there's also a fire at the front end, but the fire at the front end looks slightly off the train. Anyway, whatever, that then produced some firms data that suggested that of course that more of the train might have caught, and it could have even set off a wildfire in the area, because that's pretty significant burnage going on there. But then we see footage like this. So someone trying to shoot at drones that were attacking this train, and the train, I think, is, I don't know if the train's in front of him. Yeah, it is. Yeah, you can see it there. Yeah, so this is a guy near the train there shooting at drones. As the drones are flying at the train there, you can see one of the drones is already blown up. So this is probably troops on the ground in that video that we have just seen from the air. Now, the further details here say, it says 5 of 14 drones hit the target. So that's an interesting statistic. So most of the drones didn't hit the target. 9 of the drones failed to hit, but 5 did. 1 drone hit a military car accompanying the train, killing 2 sergeants. So yeah, they are definitely targeting trains at the moment. I think that's really good news. Now, this is a source, Aurora Borealis. I don't know this source. Again, a large convoy from Crimea, Kherson through Mariupol to Taganrog, Rostov for further deployment to Sumy and Kharkiv region. This time, no self-propelled artillery systems, but a large amount of manpower. So the claim here is that the Russians are moving a significant number of troops from Crimea through to Taganrog and then up to Sumy, possibly to shore up their troops in Sumy, where we've just been learning they are struggling to contain the Ukrainians who are pushing back. So I don't know what a significant number of troops looks like here. You know, yeah, we've got some images of some trucks filled with them. but I don't know how many in total. But it's obviously reflective of the need to get reinforcements up to the north, if that is indeed true. Right, moving on here to another booby trap incident. If you remember, I showed you one the other day where a scooter, like a moped, was ordered by some people in the army, and they went to pick it up and it blew up. Unfortunately, both of those soldiers died. Well, it's happened again with a scooter again. So Tim White says, earlier in the thread, you'll have read about the arrest of a teenager after a booby-trapped scooter killed a soldier in Kharkiv. Now, I don't know if that is... Oh, no, I don't have it. There's a picture of... Oh, in fact, he said only in thread. So... Well, I don't know if we haven't. But anyway, the other one was this one. This is the one I told you about. That scooter explodes, killed both those soldiers, very sadly. Someone's been arrested for that. Now news of a similar attack in Kiev, but this time the military man has second thoughts just in time. His online date told him keys for her flat were in the scooter. So he's obviously been set up with an online date. This guy is an Azov soldier, by the way, so it looks like he's been purposefully targeted. This is caught on CCTV. He goes to the scooter and then gets a bit of second thoughts, looks at his phone, walks away, and the scooter then explodes. I want to just be careful because I get in trouble, but the scooter explodes just then. He starts walking away, and then it explodes there, but he doesn't die. It doesn't really affect him by the looks of it. He might have, I don't know, it might have some superficial injuries, but it seems to have got away with that one, which is really good news. But this is happening quite a bit. Evidently, the Ukrainians need to be very careful of this. So the SBU and National Police detained a Russian agent who tried to blow up a soldier by luring him to a date with a girl. The terrorist is a 19-year-old resident of Kiev region. On the instructions of the curator, he made an explosive device and planted it in a scooter. So here we have a 19-year-old resident of Kiev being led to do this, presumably by someone in Russia. You don't know with these situations whether it is because his ideology aligns with the Russians, whether it's because he's being paid, whether it's because he has been blackmailed. Those are the three main options going on there. Any of those are perfectly plausible. What else? Kherson Human Safari continues, says Zarina Zabritsky. I've interviewed her twice. Go and check her out. Check those interviews out. Today, Russian drones attacked around the clock. 4 civilian men wounded. 1 man died. Fiber optic drones are now all over Kherson. More about this tomorrow. 1 killed by artillery, 2 exploded on mines. Just really sad. But here, I presume that's a Russian drone that's been brought down. It's a huge old drone, that one, with some munitions on its underside there. It's upside down there. So this is happening a lot. Kherson is just, it's a nightmare there. Absolute nightmare. And then we have some sabotage happening in Germany here. 3 days ago, somebody torched several German army trucks next to a repair shop in the MAN Trucks and Bus Service Company in the German city of Erfurt. Today, Russian channels are distributing this video. Apparently, they received it from the terrorists. So it appears very much that this is a Russian terrorist act. Erfurt has one of the largest Russian diaspora in Germany, in all of Germany. So this is a place where you get a lot of Russians, and lo and behold, you've got some military trucks that have been burnt. I mean, this is... you would not be burning military vehicles in Germany unless you're pro-Russian. I can't see that there would be, I mean, maybe some kind of Islamic terrorism, maybe, but something like this, especially if it appears on Russian Telegram channels pretty much straight afterwards, you're thinking this is Russian. So then if that is a sound conclusion, what does this mean for Germany? Like, this is an act of kind of war, terrorism on behalf of Russia? Is it? Can they? The problem is, can you connect it directly to the state of Russia? I don't know. So, in effort, Germany, unknown individuals set fire to Rheinmetall military logistics trucks, causing serious damage. Footage of the arson was shared by Russian sources, leaving no doubt as to who is behind it and who stands to benefit. Russia's long recruited agents to conduct military sabotages, even in the very heart of Europe. It's time to wake up. The Russian threat is not at the gates of Europe. It's already deep inside, says Special Concat. The question for Europe is now, how do you counter it? And are you prepared to respond symmetrically? Important questions. Right, we're moving on to distant strikes now, and a very quiet night comparatively for Ukraine. 41 drones sent into Ukraine, 24 taken out. That's actually a pretty poor interception rate, but actually it's a pretty poor percentage of a very low number comparatively, and we've seen that recently quite a bit, which is when the numbers are lower, the percentages are worse, and when they're higher, like 479 was sent in whenever it was, and actually the vast majority of those were taken out, and it was pretty good in terms of interception rate. But here, that gives you, 17 getting intercepted, 24, 17 getting through, 24 getting intercepted. So it's approaching 50%, probably 45% getting through, something like that, and that's pretty poor. But not a lot of damage that I'm hearing about. Very few reports of any strikes last night in Ukraine. This is the only one I've come across. Max25 saying the Russians attacked Druzhkivka DK, which stored humanitarian water. And there you can see it all stacked up, burning roofs. I mean, it's just an attack on humanitarian aid. It's horrific, but I don't know what attacked here. This is Druzhkivka, which I presume is the Druzhkivka by Kostantinivka and going on to Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, up around there behind Chasiv Yar. Was this a Shahed drone? Probably. They have been using them at those towns quite a bit recently. So other than that, though, not too much to report from last night. Now I'm just going to go back to what happened the previous day, which was the first day of the NATO summit, and all sorts going on with regard to Iran and leaked reports and whatnot. And this kind of got drowned out, and it shouldn't have done, because this was horrific. Death toll from a Russian missile strike on Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, from Dnipro city, has climbed up to 20 civilians. So 20 civilians killed, right? 18 of them in Dnipro, 2 in Samar, while injuring nearly 300 citizens. And the main target appears to have been the train, right? So Russian missiles hit a passenger train carrying over 500 people, along with 19 schools, 10 kindergartens, cultural venues, and medical facilities. Why is that not front page news? Which is what Kate from Kharkiv says. Well, how is the attack on a civilian train with 300 plus victims? How's that not front page story around the world? How? Death tolls risen to 20, and yet, I didn't see that getting talked about at all anywhere, really. Just incredible. Now, the Ukrainians last night were very busy indeed, by the looks of it. No damage admitted by Russia during Ukraine's overnight drone attack. The MOD says 50 drones were shot down, with almost half over Kursk region. Another 11 allegedly shot down in Rostov, 3 in the Moscow region. Residents heard at least 4 bangs there, including this. So this is in the Moscow region. You got a big bang there. You can go and check these all out. Now, we'll come back to Moscow and Taganrog and other places, but let's just focus on this. And this actually happened yesterday, as far as I can remember. In fact, I reported this to you in my video yesterday morning, hits and losses, but it seems to have been much bigger than I was certainly reporting to you since it was initially thought. Explosions have been reported in Russia's Zabaikalsky Krai. Russian media indicate that a fire erupted at a military facility near the village of Velika Tura. Official statements attribute the incident to a dry grass fire, while eyewitnesses claim to have heard at least 50 explosions. Actually, that has been going on way more as well. Sorry, way longer. So location is east of the village of Bolshaya Tura. So you got a lot of firms' data that's a big old fire. That's a lot of firms' red squares put into, so each of the squares is probably that big, right? This is just, it's all filled in. That's a lot of burning going on there at what looks like an ammunition depot. So we've got another potential big old ammunition depot destruction scenario going on. Well, here we've got more imagery of it burning, a lot of burning going on there. And not just burning, but secondary explosions. So you can hear those explosions rattle off there. And that's just a 25-second video, so you can imagine that's just happening the whole time. Tim White says, the clearest video I've seen so far of ongoing fire and explosions at the military camp in Russia's Chita region, seen earlier in the thread. And then at night still going, Chita ammunition warehouses still burning and detonating, Max25 says here. And then there's plenty more to come as well. Big news, ammunition depots in Chita, Russia are still burning after being bombed earlier in the day by Ukrainian drone forces. The intense fire at the ammunition depots is also confirmed by NASA firms data fire detection mapping. You know, this looks like a seriously good outcome for the Ukrainians here in Chita. We've got there. Now that's actually the sound of wind rather than anything else there, but you get the idea. It's a pretty significant strike, that one. So I wonder if we'll learn more about that as the days go on. And that, of course, might have significant impact, should do, if that is indeed ammunition, on the Russian ability to commit their forces and fight effectively. If you're missing an awful lot of ammunition, then that's going to be a bit of a problem. So Ukrainian drones struck a Russian military base located in the Koronevsky district of Kursk. So this is Koronovo area where they had actually got up to the edge of when they attacked into Kursk previously, the Ukrainians. So anyway, there's a strike there inside Russian territory. A large fire is reported at the scene, and locals are reporting numerous casualties. So unsure of exactly what was struck, some kind of base there. But again, another strike deep inside, well, not too deep actually, fairly, no, that's incorrect of me to say. Another strike inside Russia, and actually this is a part of a suite of strikes that seem to have been taking place in this region. So you've got, if we look at this map, that's Koronovo, where they'd initially got to, sort of like that, when they attacked into, in fact, this kind of red area was kind of the maximalist area, I think, that they were at. But Lugov and Rilsk are being hammered quite consistently at the moment, as they act as staging grounds for the Russians to attack south of the border into Sumy. So now you see what the Russians have taken here. That's where the Russians were supposedly mounting their big offensive, and they've been stopped in place there, at least according to General Syrsky. So good news for the Ukrainians there, Koronovo. Then we hear back to Moscow. So Moscow was targeted last night. I don't know how many drones, but there are explosions caught on camera in Moscow variously. Overnight, drones paid a visit to Moscow Oblast once again, says Knoll reports. As usual, local authorities claimed all targets were intercepted. Reports also indicate that the Vnukovo airport temporarily suspended arrivals due to the drone attack. Damage assessment is still ongoing, but not too much detail coming out from BDAs. Drones attacked the Moscow region, says Max 25, and Taganrog. So that's all the way back down now to the Sea of Azov area, going in from Mariupol through into Russia to Taganrog, and then you get to Rostov-on-Don. In Taganrog, local residents report at least 15 explosions. The carpet plan was implemented in Moscow's Vnukovo airport and the Kaluga airport. So that carpet plan is where they just stop all incoming and outgoing flights. Now, I saw this yesterday, but I've only seen this from Jay in Kiev, so I don't know much about this. Russia's currently burning oil, gas and chemical refining plant in the Nizhny Novgorod region, set to the theme of 70s hit TV show Chips. Well, I'm not going to play you music there, but so it appears that there is a major fire going on at some kind of chemical plant in Nizhny Novgorod, but I don't know any other detail about that. Not seen that anywhere else, so pinch of salt and all. Visioner then mentions that moments ago, as in this morning, Ukrainian forces have bombed an airfield and helicopter hangars located west of Taganrog. Now, Taganrog, as mentioned, is on the Sea of Azov, I think just on the very corner of it. And that's probably this here. You have a airbase being hit there. I'm kind of hoping that Ukraine are utilising their old ballistic missiles. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see if anything develops from that. But it could also be drones like this. So this is the drone that has been made in the form of a light airplane, really. It's for the first time, actually, footage of this drone has been released, showing the launch of the large Ukrainian kamikaze drone based on the light aircraft platform, the Aeroprat A-22, the Foxbat, I think it's also called. So you can see that taking off there. Right, now moving on to other bits and pieces. So we'll start with we talked about Sersky, we talked about Kostantinivka. We're going to move on to North Korea may deploy additional troops to Russia to fight in the war against Ukraine in July or August, and Pyongyang is continuing to supply arms to Russia, South Korean lawmakers said on Thursday, citing a briefing by the intelligence agency, according to Reuters there. So we talked about 6,000 troops, 1,000 sappers, 5,000 reconstruction workers going. They could well be troops. We've got 25,000 going to learn how to build the Shahid drones in Yaluga before probably being sent back to North Korea to then implement what they've learnt and build Shahids largely for Russia. And then there's potential for further troops to go, and it's I think a sign of how desperate the Russians are. But of course, if they can just keep pulling and pulling and pulling on North Koreans, then that extends the war just for as long as the North Koreans are willing to supply troops to Russia. This is a real problem. It's a nettle that I don't think has been grasped by allies yet enough, and I think they're waiting for them to be used inside Ukraine. A Russian special flight last night was en route to the US, according to Flight Radar 24 reports. The identity of those on board remains unknown at this time. So after NATO and after Donald Trump seemed to be giving us some of the best rhetoric we've heard him give in support of Ukraine, it's no coincidence that a flight went from Russia to the United States straight away. I wonder whether the US, Trump gave Putin the heebie-jeebies, and Putin sent someone to try and sort things out in the United States to the benefit of Russia, like we have been seeing more commonly. Now, wow, this should be front page news. This is staggering. Intel Schizo says the guy who literally was in command of the Little Green Men, once again saying, yeah, Crimea didn't want to leave Ukraine and we forced them under gunpoint. So the Russian narrative and your pro-Russian people like your David Sacks, your Elon Musks, blah, 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 these people that spout Russian propaganda, Tucker Carlson, they talk about how, look at the referendums that took place in Crimea after the 2014 Little Green Men situation. So remember, back in 2014, after Euromaidan protests, Yanukovych was kind of kicked out of Ukraine. He ran away. He wasn't actually kicked out. He got in his helicopter, flew to Moscow, and so on and so forth. And then you had the Russians taking Crimea and Donbass by having people who were operating in military uniform but without their insignias. So they ripped off their Russian insignias so that they could pretend that they were Ukrainian freedom fighters. And these were called the Little Green Men. And it turned out that Evil Gerkin here, Igor Strelkov, was the person in charge of them for a period of time. The Donetsk People's Republic, the Luhansk People's Republic, and they suddenly turned up with huge amounts of weaponry, which is quite odd for an upstart guerrilla force. And the Russians responded to accusations that all of that weaponry, towed howitzers and all sorts, infantry fighting vehicles, they all were Russian bits of kit, where they came from. And literally, Putin said, well, it's amazing what you can get on eBay these days. That was his international answer. So then you had these referendums that were run that were like fake referendums, literally at gunpoint. There were people with guns in the voting booths. People were forced to vote, blah, blah, blah. And now you get your pro-Russian propagandists saying, well, look, Crimea voted to be part of Russia. And now we have evil Gerkin like admitting here, although this appears to be from his past, but it's just why are we allowed to perpetuate, or why do we allow people to perpetuate the lies of the Kremlin when the Kremlin have effectively told us what really happened? Evil Gerkin talking openly about how the Crimean regional authorities didn't want to separate from Ukraine in 2014. So Gerkin and other Russian soldiers broke into the regional parliament and forced them to vote in support of it under gunpoint. Literally telling us there what happened. Anyway, it just annoyed me. And I know he's in prison now. So, this isn't something he's just said. But this should be something that's so obviously accepted that Crimea, I mean, it is, because there were sanctions put on Russia, but you still get people coming up with arguments against this narrative to suggest that these people wanted to succeed to away from Ukraine and to join Russia voluntarily. Right, Robin Brooks says the UK and the EU unleashed a wave of shadow fleet sanctions in May. Something really big is happening now. Those sanctions knocked out a good chunk of the shadow fleet, so Russia is having to use more Western Greek oil tankers. Sanctions do work. They do work. And here is the data to suggest that the European sanctions and the UK sanctions that went really hard on the shadow fleet, and by the way, the Biden sanctions as well, just before he left office, he put a load of sanctions on their Russian shadow fleet. We're all working together. Now, indeed, Australia's joining in, Canada's joining in. It is having an effect, right? Bad news for the Russian economy, which means, of course, good news for the rest of the world. Oil is falling so much, it's now cheaper than it was before the Iran-Israel conflict. I did a bit of a sitting by the football field last night in the sunshine of YouTube short talking about that, how the prices come down massively since the Iran-Israel conflict didn't have the devastating effect on oil prices that people thought. I mean, they did spike, but actually the market is mature enough now that it can handle things like that. OPEC Plus as a cartel has also been deciding to flood the market rather than strangle supply. That's been something they've been doing over the course of the last however many months to try and bring their prices down. Of course, that hurts Russia, but Russia are part of OPEC Plus. And there are just many other sources maybe of oil that Iran, I mean, the Strait of Hormuz, closing that would have an effect if that's still going to happen. But there are ways around single countries like Iran, like they did in maybe the 70s and previous times, where single events had huge impacts on global oil prices. I think during the revolution in Iran, didn't it like double the oil price or something like that? And that simply is just far less likely to happen nowadays. Which is, in this case, bad news for Russia, good news for Ukraine. Evgeny Yistrubin says more bad news for Russia. Amid falling budget revenues, the Russian government has sharply increased the placement of government bonds. As of June of 2050, the increase in bonds in circulation since the beginning of the year amounted to 2.5 trillion rubles. Government debt is flying into space. So all these figures going upwards. This is the total debt in Russia, and you can see it is just going up and up for the Russians. And then he also adds more bad news for Russia. The central bank decided to start issuing repos to banks again on April the 15th, which coincided with a sharp acceleration in the growth of government debt, which you just saw in the other graph. So yeah, he's just presenting more and more evidence that things are not looking good in the Russian economy at the moment. Now, Yulay investigation reveals that it's a Finnish outlet, nearly 1 billion euros worth of Airbus and Boeing aircraft parts have reached Russia since February 2022, despite strict Western sanctions. Russia uses intermediaries in the UAE, Turkey and China to bypass restrictions. Dubai is a major hub with over 360 companies involved in the shipments to Russian airlines tied to the Kremlin. Dubai has become a key hub for rerouting aircraft parts to Russia. Yulay found nearly 100 companies were involved in shipments since 2022. Despite some sanctions, new firms quickly replaced those targeted, making enforcement difficult. The UAE has no sanctions on Russia, allowing this trade to continue legally. Both Airbus and Boeing say they comply with sanctions and track genuine parts, but Yulay's investigation shows they can't control used parts or indirect sales via intermediaries. The companies have yet to explain how they prevent their parts ending up in Russia despite these networks. Western governments have sanctioned dozens of companies tied to this trade, but new ones quickly emerge with billions at stake and ties to Kremlin-controlled firms. Pressure mounts for stricter measures. So that's an issue that's ongoing. And then I just want to show you this. So 2 things to bring joy to you to finish this video. This is a case of Russians shouting, sort of glory to Russia. Victory will be ours. Russian soldiers shout as they victoriously do what you're just about to see. So we thank everyone who contributed to fundraising for this vehicle, and they've got a big motorcycle next to them.
Благодаря вам мы своевременно осуществляем доставку провизии и БК на линии боесоприкосновения. Победа будет за нами! Вот это от лица!
You've got to watch that again. Oh, I can watch that all day, every day. A bit of a Desperado quote for you. Practices all day, every day. Right, we're going to show you some a lovely little snippet. No, I won't, because I'm going to wait for to show you that in my NATO piece, but it's absolutely lovely. This comes from Pierre, who is at Glastonbury. Glastonbury, you can get in early. It's not started formally yet. It starts on Friday. The festival, music festival. This is going to play quite loud music in a second. This is a Ukrainian tent area where they've set up, and they're just having joyful joie de vivre. And Pierre Dupont is there with my ATP Geopolitics t-shirt on, and he's a legend. He says with love, effing Ukrainians. It's well on, Pierre. And here's another little snippet. So they've got their own tents there. They're fundraising. Looks really good. Here's a fundraising placard or set of photos. Absolutely brilliant. Glad that they're at Glastonbury. And here's Pierre finding a fundraiser who says is fundraising for military vehicles, wearing the old t-shirt. Well done, Pierre. You absolute freaking legend. And big love to you. And it's so cool. So I'm just gonna play this out for you again because it's so joyful. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Slava Ukraine.